Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this webinar. We would like to present you with a unique service that is relevant to each one of you. I would like to thank the Brigade Parkside community for giving us an opportunity to be here. Today, we bring to you the benefits of estate planning. Estate planning is a process of making proper arrangements for the protection, preservation, and provision of person's assets of the benefit of himself, his family, and loved ones. Today, we have amongst us Mr. K.S. Raghunandan, the founder and CEO of Elders India. Prior to his entrepreneurial stint, Mr. Raghunandan was the managing director, India and SAC for Cisco Services. Earlier, he was with IBM for 20 years, holding several leadership positions. Thank you, sir, for being the part of the webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce the speaker for today's webinar, Mr. Suresh A. Mr. Suresh has over 20 years experience in the financial service sector. He is passionate about reaching the public and creating awareness on the significance of estate planning to protect the family members' future financial security. He has conducted seminars in various corporates, financial institutions, social clubs, educational institutions, the National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience, and professional bodies like the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and the Council of Financial Planners. He has assisted over 400 Indian families with suitable estate planning in the last 5 years. Mr. Suresh is Chartered Trust, Estate Planner, and Certified Financial Planner. Over to you, sir, for today's sessions.
The topic what we are discussing today is primarily about estate planning. So estate planning deals with the planning of or deals with the management of one's assets in the event of any incapacity during life, and also the transmission of assets owned by a person after his life. So when I say estate planning, it is little to do with the real estate. So when I say estate, it includes all the assets owned by the person. Yeah, it could be real estate, it could be financial assets like shares, bonds, debentures, mutual funds, fixed deposits. It could be your precious metals like gold, silver articles, movable assets like car, furniture, and fixtures, and so on. So all these assets together, we call it as an estate. So these assets are acquired and owned by a person or a group of persons, specific persons. Okay, your property is owned by a person or persons. Shares are held in the name of a person. Bank account is held in the name of the person. Bonds certificates are issued in the name of the person. Perhaps only gold jewelry, furniture, fixtures, perhaps person name is not written until you have a receipt or bill having purchased this in the name of the person. Card is registered in the name of the person. Right? So every asset is held by a person whom we call a owner. So being a owner, he has a right in managing the assets, in having control over the assets, and passing on the benefits of these assets for the well-being of himself and family members. So it is imperative for us here to accept that life is uncertain. Okay. So it may give us nasty surprises. In the event of any untimely death, or in the event of any incapacity due to health reasons or due to age related or maybe due to accident, then how the assets owned by the person, all these assets owned by the person, how these assets can be managed, or in the event of death, which is for sure, but only timing is not sure, then how the ownership of these assets will pass on to the other members and who will have a rights to get ownership on these assets. So these are the two questions that is always left unanswered by the people who own the assets. So because of this ambiguity, there are disputes in the inheritance of one's assets and also complexities in getting the transfer of title over these assets. So when a person does not have any plan, it leads to complexities and disputes. And because of these disputes, the relationship among the family members is broken. And the assets are not put to optimum use because of litigations in the court. So estate planning addresses all these issues. So ultimately, when a person owns the asset, it is for sure he has to think that after his life, who will have a right to own these assets and how these assets can be owned by the family members, how the title or ownership gets transferred to the family members. So if you address these two questions, then we are leaving behind the property or assets to the family members with that prosperity to the family members. In the absence of any planning, if you don't decide who will have a right and how do they get it, we are not leaving the assets, we are leaving complexities and disputes to the family members. So let us see now how these assets will get transferred to the legal heirs and who will have a right among the legal heirs to get these assets. So there are two ways to decide who will have a rights of ownership after a person's life and how do they get this ownership. One is you decide and make a document that these are all the assets owned by me, following out my legal heirs, and I am transferring these assets to specific legal heir or heirs together, and they will continue to own these assets. They will have absolute right to enjoy the benefits of these assets. So when you have a document which clearly specifies the transfer of title and benefits of the assets owned by you, then we call it testament. That means you have a plan. Okay. If you don't have a plan, then law has made a plan, and the title over the property and the benefits on the property will get transferred to legal heirs only as per the plan made by the law. So there are only two options: either you plan or follow the plan of the law. So here the default option is the plan made by the law. This arises only in the event of intestate, when you don't have a plan. This is a default option. Law is supreme. It has already made its provisions. Law has made the succession plan for your assets. And law says that if you don't make a plan for your assets, plan made by the law is valid. That's it. So law has already made the plan. So if you don't want your assets to get transferred to the family members as per the law, then you should have a plan of yourself, which we call testament. Now let us just take a small time to understand who will have a right to inherit the assets owned by a person and how do they get inheritance. So there are different succession laws in India depending upon the religion of the person. So we have Hindu Succession Act 1956, which applies to the assets left behind by the Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh and Jains. Then Indian Succession Act 1925, which is applicable to Indian Christians, Parsis, and also the couple who belongs to different religions and whose marriage is registered or solemnized under the Special Marriages Act. And for Muslim personal law, which is applicable to the estate of the Muslims. And these laws have made a plan, and this plan will be valid when a person himself has not made any plan for his own assets. That means these plans will get into force only in the event of intestate. So Hindu Succession Act has made the rules for the succession of the property owned by Hindu male and Hindu female separately. So the legal rights of Hindu male are grouped into three categories: Class 1, Class 2 and residual. That is, who are not in Class 1 and Class 2, then they are grouped in residual. So as per the Hindu Succession Act, the first rights of inheritance goes to Class 1 legal heirs. In the absence of any Class 1 legal heirs, then the rights will pass on to Class 2 legal heirs. In the absence of any Class 2 legal heirs, then the rights will pass on to the residual remaining relatives. In the absence of anyone, then it goes to the government. Okay. Now let us see who are the Class 1 legal heirs. So the Class 1 legal heirs of Hindu male: mother, wife, son and daughter. That is, mother, wife and children all have equal rights when a Hindu dies without any testamentary document. The estate of such Hindu will pass on to his mother, wife and children. If this is what the plan of the person, if this is what is your plan, that in your absence, let your assets go to your mother, wife, son and daughter, then absolutely fine. Laws made a provision. Let the children struggle in getting the title over your property. If your plan is not as per the law, then you need to have a proper plan and give your assets to the person of your choice. Right? And second part, the complexity is that If we don't make a plan, then how do the family members establish their right over the assets? So they need to have a document to prove that these are all the people who are the legal heirs of the deceased person. If Ramesh has died, Ramesh's wife and children and parents should get a proper document to prove that they are the legal heirs of the estate of the Ramesh, or they are the legal heirs of the estate of the John, or they are the legal heirs for the estate of the Ahmed. So they have to run around to prove their title. First of all, they have to prove that they are the children and the heirs of the deceased person. That itself becomes complex. Even though they get some document, it only shows or lists that these are the people who are the legal heirs of the deceased Ahmed, John, or Ramesh. The document does not say they are the owners of the asset. They only say they are the family members or legal heirs of the John, Ahmed, or Ramesh. So there is no proper transfer or conveyance of title. So what is about the class 1 legal heirs? If any of the son or daughter has predeceased, then the share of such son or daughter will go to their or to his or her descendants. If son or daughter is married and son or daughter has left behind their children and grandchildren, then the share of such predeceased son or daughter will pass on to their descendants. So ultimately, all class 1 legal heirs, mother, wife, and children have equal right. So if you observe here, let us say I am Ramesh, I am a Hindu. Okay, my father is financially dependent on me. In the event of my death, my father does not have any right to claim rights on my property because he is not my class 1 legal heir. My father will get rights of inheritance only in the absence of any class 1 legal heir. If I don't leave behind my mother, my wife, and children, then as a class 2 legal heir, my father will have a right. So if my father is financially dependent on me, okay, and I leave behind class 1 legal heirs, he does not have a right to make a claim on my property. He doesn't have financial support or security. So it is necessary in such scenario that the son makes the proper succession plan, leaving behind some assets or investments for the well-being of the father. So father is a class 2 legal heir of Hindu male. So in the absence of father, then it goes to the brothers and sisters of Hindu male, and then it so on. So it becomes more and more complex going forward. Similarly, if you look into it, the assets owned by Hindu female, okay, again we have to see the source of acquisition of these assets by Hindu female. Such female could have acquired the assets out of her own resources, which we call self-acquired property, or the Hindu female could have inherited the assets from their parents, or she could have inherited the assets from the husband or father-in-law. In each of these cases, the inheritance rules are different. So, for example, if you take any self-acquired property of the Hindu female, then the first rights of inheritance will pass on to her children and husband. So, if she has not left behind husband or children, then the rights of inheritance will pass on to the legal heirs of the husband. As if it is the property of the husband, it goes to his legal heirs. The legal heirs of the husband is his mother, father, brothers, and sisters. That means the property of Hindu female will go to her in-laws. The first right goes to mother-in-law, in her absence to father-in-law, and then brothers-in-law. So in the absence of any legal heirs of the husband, then it goes to upon the father and mother, parents together. Even if parents are not alive, then it goes to legal heirs of the father, then legal heirs of the mother, which is too far. Normally, we have not come across any property going to that extent. Okay. So primarily it goes to the husband and children. In the absence of husband and children, it goes to the parents-in-law or brothers-in-law. This is a case where the property is self-acquired property of Hindu female. Suppose if she has acquired or inherited the property from her parents, property is inherited from her parents. That means on the death of the parent, she got a share out of the property held by the parents. That is what we call inheritance. So on subsequent death of such Hindu daughter, the rights on this property which she got by way of inheritance will pass on to her children, sons and daughters equally, not to the husband, only sons and daughters. So in the absence of sons and daughters, then the property will go back to the legal heirs of the father, not to the legal heirs of the husband. The property will be transferred back to the legal heirs of the father. So there are many women who don't want this property should go back to legal heirs of the father. She would like to prefer let it go to the parents-in-law or some other person. Then she should have a plan. Otherwise, this is what is the plan of the law. Suppose if a Hindu female has a property which she has inherited from her husband or father-in-law, again the first side will goes to children, sons and daughters equally. If she has not left behind any sons and daughters, then it goes to the heirs of the husband because it is inherited from them. It goes back to the same family, heirs of the husband. If she has inherited from the parents, it goes back to parents. If she has inherited from the husband or father-in-law, it goes to the family only in the absence of children. So this is how the property of Hindu female gets distributed in the absence of any planning. Then we can look at Indian Succession Act, which is applicable to the Christians. And also the estate of the couple, husband and wife, who belongs to the different religion and their marriage is registered under the Special Marriages Act. Suppose such person, male or female, doesn't matter. Christian, male or female, doesn't matter. If such person leaves behind widow or widower and lineal descendants, that is children, then 1/3 will go to the spouse, either husband or wife as the case may be, and remaining 2/3 rights of inheritance will pass on to the children. So wife will get only 1/3, 2/3 will go to the children. But perhaps there could be a situation where wife is financially dependent on the husband, or husband is financially dependent on the wife. Children are not dependent, they are well settled. But 2/3 will go to the children, only 1/3 remain with the spouse. So to avoid this anomaly, we should have your own plan. Otherwise, law, this is what the law says. If the Christian has not left a descendants, that is children, but he has left behind widow and relatives who are known as kindred, even in such case, only half the estate will pass on to the widow, remaining half will go to the kindred. And in kindred, the first in order is father, then mother, brothers and sisters, and so on. If the Christian has left behind only widow, no children, no kindred, then whole of the property, the rights will pass on to the widow. And then no lineal descendants, not married, no children, the first side will go on to the father, in the absence of father, to mothers, brothers and sisters. This is what is the plan made by the law. And this plan is applicable uniformly to all the Indian Christians. If the plan of the person is different from this plan of the law, then he should execute his plan. He should make his own plan and execute it. Then Parsis, it is different again. If the Parsi has left behind widow and children, each of them will get 1 share each. If the Parsi has left only children, no widow and no one, then children will get 1 share each. If a Parsi has left behind widow, children and parents, so widow and children get 1 share each and parents will get half share each. Similarly, if you look at Muslim personal law, again it has many different provisions. It is much more complex. So if any Muslim dies, male or female, okay, out of that estate, only the funeral expenses has to be incurred. Modest funeral expense has to be incurred. It will be a charge or a lien on the estate left behind by the Muslim. So after meeting the funeral expenses, if there are any debts or liabilities left behind by such Muslim, male or female, the estate should be utilized to repay off the debts, including the mahar, which is promised to wife. If there were to be any Muslim in this group, they might be aware about it. Mahar is the amount promised by the husband to wife on the occasion of marriage. Okay, if this is not yet paid, then that will be the first charge on the estate left behind by the Muslim. And then, if any will is made by the Muslim, we have to evaluate that the assets that are bequeathed in the will is not more than 1/3 of the total assets. Okay, a Muslim can bequeath by way of will only 1/3 of the estate. Then balance of this, after meeting the funeral expenses, after paying off the debts, after setting aside 1/3 of the assets that is made in the will, the balance of assets will get distributed to the sharers. And Quran has specified who are all the sharers and what is the share of each person. And even the share of these persons will change depending upon the number of sharers. It is much more complex calculation. We need to have an Excel sheet to do this calculation. So after assets are shared by the sharers, if any leftover is there, residual assets, that will go to other persons who are not the sharers, we call residuaries. So ultimately, what I'm trying to communicate to you is that if you don't have your own plan, the plans made by law is not simple and straightforward. It leads into various complexities and disputes. Okay, there confusion, there are expenses, distribution of assets becomes out of control. There is uncertainty how much each person will get. Okay, so even then, assuming that all these are taken care of, the next question comes: how do these family members will get access to your assets? Most of you have a bank account. You would have made a nomination on your bank accounts, and there is a nominee. Yes, in the event of death of the account holder with the bank or equity holder, mutual fund holder, as a nominee, when nomination is made, nominee will get access to this money. But as per the law, nominee does not have any beneficial interest on this money. Law says that nominee is allowed only to collect the money from these banks and other entities, but it should be distributed to legal heirs only. If the nominee does not distribute to legal heirs, they can make a claim over him. They can go to the court over this money, distribution of this money. Suppose, let us say, my wife is a nominee on my bank account and all my investments. So upon the death, as a nominee, my wife gets the money from these institutions. But my wife will not have absolute control over this money. Even my children and my mother, if I'm a Hindu, my children and my mother have a right on this money. If I'm a Christian, my wife has only 1/3 right and my children will get 2/3 right on this money. Right. So nomination is only a facility to give a valid discharge to the banks and other institutions. Nominee does not have any right on this money. But suppose you have a property, real estate, a house property, land. There is no provision to make a nomination on a house property or a land, unlike bank deposits. So how do we transfer in the absence of any testamentary document? Then we have to get a legal heir certificate or a family tree from the office of the Tahsildar, Revenue Department, because land is a revenue subject. It falls under the Revenue Department of the state governments. But even though you get a legal heir certificate or a family tree, it only mentions who are all the members of the family of a deceased person or family members of the deceased person. This legal heir certificate or family tree does not confer any rights on these assets. It only identifies who are all the legal heirs. That's it. It cannot be taken as a ownership document. Suppose if you have not made a nomination on your bank deposits or other financial assets, or nomination is made, but nominee has predeceased already, or for some reason nomination is held to be invalid, in such case, if the balance in the accounts exceeds certain limits, then the legal heir should get a succession certificate from the court to claim the money from banks and financial entities, which becomes a very complex. Or a letter of administration again issued by the court. It is all time consuming and expensive process which leads into complexities. So these are the drawbacks when we don't have a proper plan. So to overcome all these complexities and disputes, to ensure that the assets are passed on in a seamless manner, the next alternative we have is to have a plan by yourself, what we call estate planning. So estate planning is a systematic approach to deal with the management of your assets in the event of any incapacity and transfer of legacy to the next generation. The objective of estate planning is to make sure that your estate transition is seamless with least complexities and expenses. One thing I would like to bring to your notice is that whether you accept or not, please understand that there is a cost involved in transfer of title to the next generation. The question now is whether you incur that cost today by yourself or you inflate it and let your children to incur the cost in the future. If you do it today, the advantage is that the title transfer is certain, the cost is minimized, and the inheritance will happen as per your choice. If you don't incur this cost and have a plan, Ultimately, your children in the future have to incur the cost to get the title in their name, and the cost will be 10 times more than the cost what you incur today. Title will not pass on automatically. There is a cost and expenses. So the purpose of estate planning is that there is smooth transfer of assets or estate to the legal heirs. So when we have estate plan, it avoids disputes among the legal heirs. It deters complexities in the transfer of assets. And most importantly, it provides assets to the right beneficiary, to whomsoever you want, person of your choice. You want your assets to go to your wife? Yes, you have an option. You want the assets to go to your son or a daughter? Yes, you have a choice. You want to give your assets to a charity? Yes, you have a choice. If you don't have your plan, then only as per the law. And most importantly, it reduces burden on the family. So who needs estate planning? To help you, whether you need estate planning or not, I just take few points here. If you relate to any of the points here, if it is applicable to you, then you need estate plan. If you own immovable property or a real estate, you need an estate plan. Because the title to the property is considered to be good and marketable only when it is conveyed, only when the title is conveyed through a registered deed. I cannot claim a title over my father's property through unregistered deed. So any person who owns a property, to ensure that there is seamless transfer of title, should have an estate plan. A single parent with minor child or children, which may not be applicable to you, but it could be useful to your children. Okay. Financially dependent spouse could be, some of you could be in that situation. Okay. If you don't make a proper plan and give that support to your spouse, then even your children, in their absence, their children can make a claim on your estate as per the law. They have a right. Any person who is suffering from critical illness or any healthcare issues, where the survival probability is low. So let us accept that we have to give away our life one day. Okay, that is for sure. Okay, only the time we can differ. But when that situation comes, better we accept this and ensure that there is no complexities to the family members. So a person is suffering from any critical illness, better he make a proper plan. And he also need to have a plan to manage his assets for his own benefit. A person who is down with critical illness, he is himself is not able to manage his assets or estate. So he needs support of someone. So how can you empower another person to manage your assets? That is also a part of estate plan. Okay. And a spouse is not capable of managing the assets. When a spouse is aged person, she cannot run around, or he or she cannot run around in managing this, like a couple. Okay, so there is a need to ensure that spouse gets a proper support in managing the estate. A couple with no children, who will have a rights of inheritance after their life, let it not go to the wrong hands or to the people who don't need it or who don't even respect it. Okay, or when a person has any family member with special needs, could be challenged children, disabled children, or intellectually or physically, okay, or any other person who has a special needs or specific needs. Okay. So when any of these issue is applicable to you, then you need to have an estate plan to protect the interest of your family member or your loved ones. So 3 documents we consider in estate planning. One is will, which will enable you to transfer the title of your property after your life. Then we have family trust, which helps you to preserve your assets and pass on the benefits only on the assets. And power of attorney will help you to reach where you cannot. So a will is a written document by which a person directs how his or assets are distributed upon his death. A will comes into effect or into force only on the death of the person. So many think that once they make a will, they lose control over their assets. It's absolutely wrong. Okay, will is only a contingent plan. Okay, as long as the person who has made a will is alive, the will is not effective. It comes into force only upon the death of the person who made the will. We call him testator. He's a person who makes a will. Okay, even though when a person makes a will, he has every right to revoke or cancel the will. to declare the will null and void, or to make amendments or changes to the will. Okay. So a will can be changed or modified anytime during the lifetime of the testator. So registration of will is optional. Registration is optional, but it is highly recommended, especially if you own the immovable property, it is highly recommended to register the will. Okay. When the option is given, obviously we have to choose the right option or which is appropriate one. So if you ask me to register or not register, the appropriate one is to register the will. Okay. So in the will, the person who makes the will, we call him a testator. And the persons whom we have identified to receive the property under the will, we call them beneficiaries. When you make a will, you also need to appoint a person known as executor. So executor is a person who steps into your shoes, who sits in your chair, and he will do whatever you would have done in the distribution of your assets. So in your absence, you are identifying a person and you are giving responsibility to such person to do whatever you want to do in the distribution of your assets. Such person is known as executor. So when you make a will, you should also declare that such will is a last and final will. Every will you make, you should declare that last and final will. And you should also very clearly indicate in the will the intentions for making the will. Then you should identify your assets, identify the family members or legal heirs to whom you are passing on the title of these assets to such family members. And clearly make a declaration that you are transferring the rights, title, and benefits on the assets listed in the will to the specific person who is mentioned in the will. You also make a provision for payment of debts, if any, for meeting the hospital expenses. Minor children, if anyone has, we can also appoint a guardian to look after the minor children. And a will has to be signed on each and every page by the testator who is making the will. And every will must be attested by two witnesses who are not the beneficiaries under the will. So these are the requirements to make a will. So will enables you to transfer the title over your property. So other alternative is trust. So a trust is a fiduciary relationship where the first party, known as author, empowers the second party, known as trustee, to hold and manage the property for the benefit of third parties, known as beneficiaries. So there are three parties in the trust, that is author, trustee, and beneficiary. Let us say I am the person who want to protect the property for the well-being of my family members. I want to create or settle a trust. I am known as author. Okay. I settle a trust and I transfer my assets or property to the trust. And I give a name to the trust. Let us say Sunshine Trust. So I create a trust by name Sunshine Trust. I transfer my property to the trust. And this property will be managed by the trustees to whom I have given authority, who are the second parties. Trustees are the people on whom I have a trust. Okay, I have a confidence in them. I believe in their capabilities. Okay, and I request them, I ask them to manage this property as if I am managing. And whatever income that generates on this trust property, I ask the trustees to use this income for the welfare and well-being of the beneficiaries. So beneficiaries are the family members. So I create a trust for my parents. Okay, I want to keep aside 5 lakhs for the well-being of my parents. Even though I give 5 lakhs to my parents, because of their age, they themselves will not be able to manage this money. But if something happens to me, I am skeptical whether my family members will give this 5 lakhs to my parents. So instead, I will create a trust. So here I am the author of the trust. I transfer 5 lakhs to the trust. I ask the trustees to invest this money, and whatever interest income, dividend income that is earned on these investments of 5 lakhs, I will ask the trustees to spend this money for the needs of my parents. Okay, this is what is about the trust. So this is called private trust because the beneficiaries are family members. So when the trust is required, when a person is not able to manage his own estate due to any reasons, okay, could be health reasons, could be age, could be illness, or whatever it is. When a person himself is not able to manage his assets, he needs support of other person. But we cannot trust the individual and transfer all our assets to another person. So we transfer the property to the trust and take the help of another person to manage the property, not the ownership. Single parent with minor child or children. Single parent having a minor children. If something happens, even on the demise of the single parent, then who will have a right to hold the property of the minor and manage the property of the minor, and also to look after the personal care of the minor? So in this case, trust will be the useful instrument. Parents with special child or children, intellectually challenged, or any other disabilities. Okay, special persons or person with special needs. Okay, in the absence of parents, their concern is that on whom they can trust and give all the assets to such person for the welfare of the children. So trust could be alternative option there. To provide financial security for spouse and children, security for parents, or could be for married daughter. Instead of giving money to married daughter, where she can be under pressure or force from their husband or in-laws to part with this money, okay, a trust can be created and funds can be transferred to the trust, which is held by the trustees in a fiduciary capacity, and use this money for the well-being of daughter and her children. Okay. So preservation of wealth for the generations. So these are the various purposes for which a trust can be created. And finally, we have power of attorney. So attorney is nothing but a representative. Okay, so you are appointing a representative to do certain acts on your behalf, and you give that authority to such representative. Like, what is power? When you give an authority, you are giving power to your representative. Okay, so what kind of acts a representative can do on your behalf? So whatever act or actions you can do legally for yourself, all those acts and actions you can empower your attorney to do. Or you can restrict your authority to your attorney only for a specific purposes. So when you appoint a person to do certain acts on your behalf, the deed through which you appoint, such document is known as power of attorney. It is a document that enables you to appoint a person or organization to manage the property or to take decisions with respect to your medical affairs when a person becomes unable to do so. Say, power of attorney will help you to reach where you cannot. Say, power of attorney can be a general power of attorney, or it can be a special power of attorney, medical power of attorney, or we call power of attorney for financial affairs. So when you don't give any specific authority or a purpose for which this attorney is appointed, and you allow him to do all the acts, whatever you can do as per the provisions of law, such authority is known as general power of attorney. So when you appoint an attorney only for a specific purpose to do specific act, like sale of property, purchase of property, filing of income tax returns, representing you in the court of law, it is given for a specific purpose, then such document is known as special power of attorney. Similarly, when you give a power of attorney to manage your financial assets like bank deposits, investments, demat account, mutual funds, then we call it as a financial power of attorney. So you as a senior citizen, you can appoint any of your family member or other persons as a representative to manage and maintain your accounts, to operate your accounts. And then medical power of attorney. When a person himself is not in a position to take healthcare decisions, in such cases, he can make a provision whereby appoint a person and give him authority to take healthcare decisions on someone's behalf. This is what is known as medical power of attorney. So even power of attorney is one of the important tools. This is useful in the management of one's properties or his personal care during his lifetime if he or she becomes incapacitated. So estate planning deals not only with the transmission of the legacy to the next generation, it also deals with the management of one's assets in the event of incapacity during the lifetime of the person. So these are the few points I thought I will cover.